need to hit record actually. We purposely record them so that, you know, for I don't know, if you can't attend all 4 sessions, if for some reason your internet goes down or the doorbell goes or whatever it might be they're having at home, that you'll still be able to catch up on what you've missed, you know, on the recording. I very much hope that as many of you as possible are going to attend live, because it just makes it better, because we can, you know, I'm going to encourage you to engage through the chat and to share, I don't know, some of the shared experiences we have around change and uncertainty with our children as well. So so that's a little bit of housekeeping. For those of you that are just joining, I can see the numbers are just ticking up as I'm speaking. Don't worry, I've literally only introduced myself. I'm Lucy Bailey. And if you want to get involved through the chat, then choose, if you want everybody to see your comments, they just see your name and the comments, choose everyone. And if only you want me to see your comments, choose host and panelist, because I'm basically the host and the panelist. So yeah, there's going to be 4 sessions. Each one is going to roughly last about an hour. And as I say, I am going to try and make it as interactive as possible, even though you can only see and hear me. I do hope that you're going to be able to join in through the chat. And yeah, just to repeat that they are being recorded so that if you do miss any, that you can catch up on demand. So at the end of each session, you'll get an email, probably not this evening, probably be tomorrow. You'll get an email from somebody in the team. They'll send you the recording and also all of the materials that are going to be to support your, you know, the conversations that you have with your children at home. So we've got both the content, which really is a space for you, you know, for us as parents to think about, you know, how we support our children through uncertainty and through change, but sort of thinking about it for ourselves first. And I hope the ideas are going to be useful for you, but also help think about how you talk about change with your children. And then we'll also provide some sort of supporting resources that you can either use, I don't know, sort of more formally as sort of teaching and learning type materials, or you can just use them informally, or you can choose to not use them at all. That's absolutely fine. When we asked you to register, we asked you to tell us the ages of your children, and I can tell you that we've got children, you've got children from 18 and above right the way down to age 2. The biggest chunk of you have got children sort of from about the age of 5 through to 13. I have my children are both grown up, so mine are now 27 and 24. One of them's left home, one of them's still at home, but you know, I've got that experience of actually thinking about the range of different you know, change that our children go through. I mean, you know, change is a part of life, right? We are all dealing with change all of the time. My goodness, we've just had the biggest sort of change to our lives and uncertainty, you know, put on us through COVID-19. But, you know, even if we put COVID-19 to one side, you know, life is about change and uncertainty. And so, you know, this program really is helping to think about how we can really help our children deal with that change and uncertainty. Part of it is about, you know, understanding, first of all, the sorts of different changes and transitions that we can face, and so not being sort of frightened or scared of them. But I think for me, it's about, and what we're going to talk about is actually what is normal for us. You know, if we think about our emotions and our behaviours and our responses to things, you know, what is normal, because then if we know that and we can think about that, then we also know what's not normal for us, you know, and so then that's a sort of a little trigger. Okay, that's not how I would normally respond to this, so it's something to pay attention to. And you know, the key for us at Bounce Forward is that how we as adults respond to change is absolutely vital. It's not just, you know, children and young people, our children recognize it's not just about what we say that matters, and that matters quite a lot, but it's also the behavior that we model. So it's no good on the one hand sort of, you know, coming out with a load of words that sort of say, well, don't worry, and you know, and you're going to be okay, if your behavior that you're modeling is sort of opposite to that, because our children pick up on the behavior that we model as well. So really these 4 sessions are almost like a little oasis for us as parents to come together. I'm going to share some content and some ideas with you. We're going to hopefully have a bit of a conversation with each other, you know, through the chat, and to think about, you know, some shared sort of challenges that you might have and that we might have together. And then to think about, you know, actually how you can apply and think about this, you know, in your home setting, is in your home, to help you support your children. Just a little bit about Bounce Forward. So we are a national charity. We specialise in practical resilience training for schools. So what that means is that we've been trying to, over the last 13 years, provide evidence-based approaches built on the ideas that we're going to talk about through Resilient Transitions, and to help think about how they can provide those as good quality lessons in school. I believe, backed up by the work that we've done, the research that we've done at Bounce Forward, that emotional resilience is absolutely a core skill that we need to teach children and young people. It actually becomes a statutory requirement for schools from September. So they have to teach health education as part of their, you know, of their delivery. That doesn't necessarily mean that they've got to, you know, include lessons the same as they would maths and English. But what I am trying to advocate for is that it should be a proper lesson, taught by trained teachers and professionals who, you know, because to me it's life skills and it's stuff that matters just as much as their academics, you know, maths and English and those sorts of things as well. So that's our sort of core of the work that we've done. We've trained over 10,000 teachers from you know, over 1,800 schools across the country. Our work is wedded in positive psychology. In its sort of simplest terms, that means sort of understanding the brain when it's working at its best. Traditionally, psychology has been a sort of a deficit understanding, working out, you know, when our brain is ill, you know, psychosis, depression, mental illness, really important areas of study. Positive psychology is just trying to help us understand when our brain's working at its best. What can we learn from optimism as a choice? What about human strengths and understanding those, positive emotion and the benefits that that can have? So, and what we've done at Bounce Forward is sort of translate that research and science into practical things that we can use in school, but also for adults around children and young people, including parents, can use to help us be resilient, develop emotional resilience for ourselves, but also then that we can pass on and help our children understand those ideas as well. For me and for us at Bounce Forward, mental fitness is as important as physical fitness. So we need to nurture and look after and build that sort of psychological muscle. It doesn't happen overnight. It's something that we have to continually pay attention to. And I'm sure some of you will be, you know, a lot more familiar with sort of looking after your well-being and your, you know, your emotional resilience than others, and that's fine. But what I'm hoping we do over these 4 sessions is sort of build some of that sort of understanding and knowledge so that you can use it in a way which is helpful for you. So I hope it's going to be relevant. And I think the final thing that I'll say in terms of an introduction is that whilst what I'm going to be talking to you about is very personal, emotional resilience, so it might, I don't know, like touch a nerve with you on some of the things, or some things it might be, you know what, you suddenly sort of get your eyes open to something that you haven't necessarily noticed before. So it can feel a bit therapeutic and a bit you know, like a personal development type thing, you know, but it's, you know, so, and that's good and that's helpful, but it's not intended to solve individual problems. So whilst I might ask you to sort of share more generally some of the challenges that we might be facing around change, uncertainty and transition, what I can't do is sort of help you as an individual, help your 13-year-old daughter, you know, whatever it might be. So you know, it's not there to sort of solve individual problems in that way, but I hope we talk about things that are relevant and that make a difference, that then you can apply them to your specific situations. And I will say that if any of you do have something very specific that you would just like a conversation with me directly about, please do get in touch. You know, use the info@Bounce Forward email address, the one that you've had from us, and you know, do get in touch. And I, you know, absolutely am willing to have a conversation with you. As I say, I can't help you solve your individual problems, but I might be able to sort of help you think about what we've talked about in a more sort of specific type way. So that is open to you as well. No extra charge or anything like that. You've already paid your money to attend this, so it would all be part of it. And I've just put the email address in the chat for you. So that's where we're headed. Before I go any further, any sort of initial, I mean, what I really want to encourage you to do is to sort of say hello to each other, that we start to feel a bit of a community over these next, what is going to be sort of a 2-week period. So we've got today, Thursday, next Tuesday and next Thursday. And so I hope we sort of start to have that sort of bit of sense of community as we go as well. So, please, pop in some comments as I go. If you've got questions and things, please pop them in there. And at certain points I will pause and sort of come back to them. And for those of you that have literally just joined us as I've, because I can see a couple of people have joined, please don't worry, these sessions are recorded so you can catch up on the introduction. So this is an overview of the 4 sessions. Today is very much an introduction and almost just sort of to get you to stop and reflect on what the concerns and barriers are for you, as you think about your children and transition and change and uncertainty, from a sort of a personal perspective, what are some of the things that matter to you? Again, we asked you as part of the sign up the sorts of things that you had concerns around transitions, and I'm just going to share some of those with you to sort of give you a sense of the sort of things that we're going to be talking about. So someone said, my daughter struggles with anxiety and low self-esteem. Her best friend's just moved away, and so she's worried about returning to school. That friendship that sort of feels a bit like a safety net, and that's gone. And so that, I think some of you will share some of that idea. Just general anxiety with transition due to autism. We're not specifically, this program is a sort of a general program for all parents thinking about their children. Some of the things, I think particularly around those that are on the spectrum, some of the frameworks which we provide, our approach to resilience, I think really helps children that are on the spectrum, because they often not so good at dealing with their emotions, but can sort of see the behavior that's associated. So, I think as we go through, you'll see how some of the language that we use and some of the frameworks that we talk about actually are really helpful for those that are on the spectrum. Some people just here to learn and to develop and sort of take in the information. Somebody said that their child is very attached and finds it hard to leave. Them as a parent. I don't know if that's a mum or a dad. I know we've got both mums and dads in the room with us. That behaviour starts to deteriorate when faced with transition and change. So, you're sort of stopping that sort of normal balance, and then you can start to, as you get closer and closer to the change, you can start to see some of the behaviour deteriorate, which again, I'm sure some of you will relate to as well. Just general difficulty from moving from one thing to another. This is someone who's got 2 sons. What else have we got? Just general lack of resilience, difficulty to adapt for their 12-year-old, and just wanting to really support my children, making a very conscious effort not to share your own anxieties regarding transition. And that sort of came through a number of times, people saying just sort of general self-confidence, dealing with your own anxieties around it, as well as sort of thinking about your children's anxieties. So, I think all of those things that we're going to cover. So today, very much an introduction, thinking about some of those. Session 2 will really think about developing a growth mindset to change, and we will focus on the work of Carol Dweck, sort of as the core focus, not completely, but we'll point to that. Session 3 is really thinking about how we support our children to really regulate those unhelpful emotions. I'm going to talk to you today about actually how all emotions are important, because they're telling us something, but some emotions can be unhelpful to us. So we really session 3 is really going to drill down and think about that. And then session 4 is really thinking about our human connections and how important they are. As that parent said, for their child, where their sort of best friend has moved away, how can we really help our children think about not only creating new connections, human connections, because that's absolutely vital, but also enable to sort of strengthen the ones that we've got. So session 4 is really going to think about that in relation to transition. So, you know, what underpins our approach to resilience is, oh, sorry, I'm going a bit too quickly, is a set of competencies that are absolutely wedded in the science. So what we've done is sort of look to the science around what resilience is and how you can build it, and how that helps in terms of thinking about some of the things that we face in life. You know, and this is a particular focus on transition and change and uncertainty. And then we've sort of moved that science into sort of practical competencies. These are the competencies that we want to develop, the behaviours that we want to try and encourage. And these, if you like, are the sort of universal things that that help in all sorts of sort of personal development. So I'm going to really encourage you with your children in all sorts of situations. Help your children to develop the ability to think flexibly and realistically. Be open and curious to different perspectives. As early as possible, helping our children to recognise that there is, you know, that there is a sort of a reality that we can get. That, you know, that will enable us to, if we're more wedded to reality, have got a better sense of what's actually going on, then we're able to problem solve better. One of the challenges that we have around change is that often we have our sort of thinking around change is either overly negative, you know, it's focusing on all the negative and or you know, we sort of start to catastrophize about it, or we're not really dealing with the reality. We're sort of ignoring some of the problems and the real problems that there might be, and focusing on all, you know, trying to pretend that they're not there. And both of those things don't help when we truly want to problem solve. So, you know, developing that competency in our children and in ourselves to be able to think as much as possible realistically about our situation and flexibly, so that we recognise that there are different ways of seeing the same situation. And by opening ourselves up to that, how does that help us think about dealing with it? Self-regulation, that ability to first understand the emotions that we experience, really having that emotional intelligence, and then being able to think about how we regulate them, and regulate not, you know, to both in, you know, to sort of express and feel the emotions that we're feeling that are helpful to us, and be able to sort of control and calm down those emotions that are unhelpful to us. And self-regulation is also about impulse control. So that sort of sense of recognizing that sometimes it's all about the longer journey, you know, the delayed gratification. So in the short term, I might need to do something that sort of takes me outside of my comfort zone, and I do that in a safe way. And we're going to talk a lot about comfort zone. But recognizing that the short-term anxiety that I might feel, or sort of lack of comfort that I might feel, is going to be better for the long term. So really building that competency of self-regulation. Self-awareness, you know, what's normal for me? You know, that sort of sense of really knowing who I am, you know, knowing what I can experience, and you know, and what's normal for me, and what's normal for me when I am faced with change, so something new for the first time, you know, and no, you know, because the sort of more I have that sense of self-awareness, the more I know what's normal for me, and as I said at the start, what's not normal for me. And that if I understand myself, that leaves me in a much better position to not only have compassion for myself, to not beat myself up too much. And I can guarantee that lots of you will spend a lot of the time thinking about all the things that you do wrong, and not the things that you're doing right. You know, we have this sort of tendency to sort of focus on the negative stuff. So more sort of sense of compassion for ourselves. And then if we can have compassion for ourselves, it means that we can extend that and have compassion for other people as well. So that those are competency to develop. Hope and optimism, and that's about having a realistic, you know, belief that, you know, have a trusted belief in myself that the sort of realistic goal can be reached, and that I have a, you know, that ability to be able to choose optimism. And I'm going to talk a lot about the difference between optimism and pessimism, and how choosing optimism is just, you know, better for us moving forward. And the final one is this sort of sense of human connection. I mean, it might sound ridiculously, you know, common sense thing to say, but our human connections really matter. And, you know, one of the things that we know through both the science, you know, of resilience, but also, you know, from a personal perspective, that you know, eye contact with people really matter. Being with somebody and talking to them really matters. And we know this through, you know, through lockdown, don't we? You know, that sense of not suddenly being able to go and pop round and see whoever it is, and sort of being told that we can't do that, the impact that that's had on our overall sort of, you know, emotional health and well-being as you know, has been stark. So, you know, recognizing that human connections really matter. So, you know, and it's about having strong human connections with both people that, you know, are in our family and beyond our family. And I think as parents, as our children start to sort of develop those relationships beyond the family, the safety of the family, you know, particularly as they move into adolescence, sometimes that's quite a difficult change for us as parents to be able to deal with. So, you know, thinking about that sort of sense of why human connections matter for us at different points from a sort of psychological sort of basis, if you like, and then being really able to nurture that so that we can reach out, so that we can have empathy and care for other people, but also so that we're able to communicate and to connect. So these are the sort of core competencies that sort of, you know, underpin our work. But I would say to you as parents, just find as many opportunities as possible to, you know, to develop these in your children in all sorts of different ways, because it will make a difference to their overall resilience. These are the competencies, the sort of behaviours that you want to try and encourage and see, as much as you might, I don't know, your please and thank yous, or your, you know, not running across the road because it's dangerous. Do you know what I mean? It makes as much, it's just as important for me in terms of their development as some of those things as well. And ultimately, you know, what those resilient competencies do is help us communicate, helps us express ourselves, because we can articulate it in a way which makes sense to each other, you know, and in that process of understanding and being able to understand self and communicate, it also helps us to have understanding and respect for other people. It's the human element of stuff that really matters. And that for me is what's at the heart of why change fails. Because, you know, if you think about how we deal with change, often what we do is put way too much emphasis on all of the doing stuff, right? You know, the practicalities, the physical change, you know, from one building to the next, the expectation, you know, what uniform are you going to wear? And, you know, you're going to, you know, how's the classroom going to be, you need to look different. You're going to have to move from class to class if they're moving from primary to secondary, or they're going to have a new teacher, or, you know, what the expectation and the new school rules are going to be, for example, or, you know, thinking about, you know, the plans that you might have of getting to and from places, how, you know, who you're going to walk with, you know, if I'm going to drop you off, the times, all of that stuff is the stuff that focuses. And what we forget is the human aspect, the beliefs that we have, the feelings that we experience around change. And so, you know, for what I'm going to try and do through these sessions is sort of try and create a bit of balance. Yes, you've got to do all the practical stuff. Of course, you know, the process stuff matters. You've got to get it done. You've got to, you know, but just trying to even out that sort of sense of the human aspect of it, which is a lot about our beliefs, what we believe to be true about the change and the uncertainty and the transition, and the feelings that are associated around it as well. And that we can do that in a way which is practical and feel safe, and, you know, we're able to do that. So I want to just pause for a second and get you to join in through the chat. And, you know, so for you, you know, why is change difficult? What is it about change that for you makes it difficult? And what are some of your sort of main worries? I mean, I've shared some of those that you had, but, you know, as a group, let's you know, just share what are some of the main sort of concerns that you might have. So I know when I pose a question like that, it takes a few seconds for you, first of all, to find the keyboard and to start typing. It takes a bit of bravery, because the first person to put something in there. So, you know, I know that it, you know, it can take a little while to just get some of those comments in there. So I'm just gonna sort of keep talking and fill the space for a second, just to allow some people to put some comments in there. And as people are doing that, I know that some of you have joined only in the sort of last 5 minutes or so. So just to repeat that these are recorded, so don't worry on the bit that you've missed. You can go back and watch that, and that will be sent out to you after the session. But it'll be tomorrow morning, I would think. So a couple of comments coming in now. Thank you very much. Hi, Lisa, and thank you so much for putting it into everybody. That's amazing. So the main worry is that my son, who's 12, is quite reluctant to share that he's worried or anxious, and it's hard to know how to help without any clues. Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? We know, you sort of say, well, what are you worried about? And they either don't know, they say, oh, I don't know. Or as you say, you know, that they, for whatever reason, it's just hard to share it. We'll talk a lot about that, Lisa, you know, and thinking about how we find a sort of a safe way to both, I don't know, part of it sort of, you know, the sort of communication sort of side of things, but also finding ways to just sort of open up some of those things that they might be thinking. Marina says, yeah, change, I can't control the outcome. Okay, and I try and think of every possibility or eventuality which adds to the anxiety to yourself and then to your children. And that's so interesting that, you know, you're sort of, you know, because of that expectation is not there, and so you're preparing for every eventuality. I mean, the energy and the time and the, you know, first of all, hats off you, but, you know, because you're trying to be prepared as possible. But yeah, I think sometimes sort of putting, you know, sort of so much time and emphasis into all the possible outcomes, yeah, can be exhausting apart from anything else. Yeah. Yeah, somebody else just saying, not really sure, you know, where the end goal is. And I think that's interesting as parents as well. And, you know, and I think it gives me the sense that these are sort of adolescents. So, you know, when our children are very small, everything that happens to them is in our arm's length almost, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You're in the family home, or you're, you know, even if you're out, you're with them. And I think that sort of sense of sometimes, particularly as they move into adolescence and they start to do more things on their own and move into that sort of sense of responsibility and you not being with them all of the time. And so I think, you know, that sort of sense of not knowing where it's going to end as a parent can feel quite unsettling, because, you know, that they're out of sight. And, you know, I remember when mine moved from primary to secondary school and feeling that real sense of, you know, at primary, you're sort of there at the school gate, you know, you talk to the other mums and dads, you know, you might have a chat with the teacher at the door when they come out, you know, there's all of that go, you know. Then they move to secondary school and all of a sudden you're not having any of that contact, and they're going into this, you know, this big building that, you know, and thinking about ways in which you can sort of deal with that, you know, for yourself, as you say, so that you can then, you know, be supportive to them. Yeah, thank you for that. And just one other comment there, that sense of you know, it's actually your own anxiety which you're sort of putting onto your children and wanting to stop that, really. And thank you for sharing that, because I do think that just that acknowledgement sometimes that it's actually our concerns that we have, and if we stopped and think about, you know, actually are they the concerns that our children have got, and they might not be. So you know, we'll talk about all of those things. Thank you so much for that. So, you know, we know that change can be hard, first of all, when we focus on the wrong things. And I say wrong with inverted commas because I don't mean that there's a right and a wrong way to do change and uncertainty, because that would be a miracle, wouldn't it? If you had a book that said, well, if you just do this, 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 and this, it's going to be perfect. Unfortunately, it's not like that. But I think, you know, it's that sort of sense of focusing on all of the process type stuff and not thinking about the more human aspect of things, and, you know, and recognizing and thinking, you know, having that sort of sense of empathy around, you know, when we're dealing with change and uncertainty. It's going, you know, it's going to, you're going to feel more anxious. It is going to be more stressful, and that's okay. You know, because when you do anything, you know, for the first time, it absorbs more energy, and, you know, and that sort of uncertainty is a natural response to it. You know, and I think when we focus on the wrong things, we can tend to not listen to our children with empathy, or to each other with empathy. So I don't know, you might be worried about what you consider to be the big things around change, and yet your child is worried about something really small, in your mind, really small and minor. And so you start, you ignore that, and you don't listen, and we stop listening with that sense of really understanding what it feels like to go through change, through the eyes of our children, or through the eyes of the other person. And as soon as we stop listening, and we stop being able to truly listen to with empathy, and we're going to talk a lot about that, that our thinking is inaccurate and fixed. We have a sense of this sort of fixed sense of what that change is going to be, and actually it might not be completely true. And again, I think this is really important, that and this might be hard for some of you to hear, I don't know, but it's really important that we cannot live our children's lives for them, right? Our children are going to experience things that we wouldn't necessarily want for them, right? Our children are going to experience things in a different way to our experience of life. And that's so important. The way our children will experience life is going to be different in some way or another to the way that we experienced, changing from primary to secondary, or, meeting new friends, or starting a new club, or whatever it might be, in terms of change. And so, thinking about that sense of having this sort of fixed idea around what our children should and shouldn't expect is not necessarily, an accurate way to see it. So I think part of what I'm going to talk to you about is just making sure that you've got that sense of what you believe to be true and right and wrong about the situation, and recognizing that may not be completely accurate, or the same way in which your children might be seeing it. And so I think, because sometimes our thinking is inaccurate and fixed, what we don't do is build in really important recovery around change. So what do I mean by that? As I just said a moment ago, when we are facing something new for the first time, it naturally absorbs more energy. You're naturally, because you're having to think more about it, you're not sure what's expected, and so it creates more sort of uncertainty in you. Just at that really sort of low level, you're already using more energy. You take it up a notch, you've got this real anxiety because your child's best friend has moved away and they don't have that safety net there, and you're worrying about how they're going to experience their And so what we don't do is build in that real time for recovery, to be able to think about how I can, recharge my batteries. And we don't build in recovery for our children to help them recharge the batteries, right? So we're going to, to talk about that very explicitly as well. And the final thing, which I've sort of already alluded to, really, but that our children don't live up to our ideals. And I suppose I sort of mean by this is that we bring them up in a certain way, don't we? And when they're in our safety net, you know what I mean, in our space, they're a certain way. And then they get into an external situation, and they suddenly forget to say thank you, or suddenly forget to be polite, or suddenly forget that they've got a voice and that they can speak, and and how they might normally be at home, and they're all full of themselves and dancing around, and then they get into this other situation and they're completely different. So we have these sort of set of ideals around our children and their personality, and and who they are, and then we see them in this in this new changed environment, and they're different. That's what I mean by our ideals. And the question is always, in my mind, is that necessary because they almost need to behave in that way to help them get into this new environment, right? Which you might not like, but actually works for them. Or is it about actually you letting go a bit, you know what I mean? And that's it, so that's what I mean by, our children really living up to our ideals. And so really starting to think about, how that plays into how we support and help our children with change. And Lisa's just saying, yeah, she's really struggled to adapt to this as a parent having 2 younger children with possible ADHD. And you say possible because you're not quite sure yet. And, you know, and again, I think that's, you know, you've got your children and you know they're you know they're what they're used to, you know, their sort of limitations, and their, you know, and you know them inside out, and all of a sudden you're sort of releasing them into this environment who don't know them, and teachers who perhaps don't necessarily know about ADHD or, you know, or ADHD for your children, or, you know, and that's tough, right? Because you know what we want is our children to be safe and secure and, you know, and comfortable, and there's that, you know. But the reality is, guys, that we can't prevent that. But what we can do is really equip them, and to think, you know, and to think about how we support them through that process. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Lisa. So at the heart of our approach to resilience is this sense that there is this link between what we think and how we feel and how we behave. Now, I haven't got time in this program to get into this in real detail, but to just give you an overview of it, psychologists used to say stimuli response. Something happens and we respond. There's a trigger. Could be could be a difficult thing, it could be a positive event, and we respond. We have we feel something and we behave in a certain way. And over time, behavioural psychology said, well, hold on a minute, that can't be true, because I can put 2 people in exactly the same situation and they are going to respond differently. They're going to feel differently and they're going to behave differently. And Albert Ellis and his colleagues came up with this idea of beliefs. When something happens, we have an internal radio station which tells us about the thing that's happened. It gives us an interpretation of either what's caused the situation or the implications of it. And it's these beliefs that we have that lead to how we feel and how we behave, not the activating event. It's not the thing that's happened. So, you know, for example, you know, the activating event may be that my child has changed school, right? They've moved from this school to this school, maybe a primary school to secondary school, maybe from a school from area to area. I have a set of beliefs that says, you know, my child may have a set of beliefs that says, you know, I'm not going to know anybody. Everybody else will, you know, everyone else will know somebody else and I won't. I'm going to get lost and I'm going to be scared. They might be the things that they think about having changed schools, and so, you know, it leaves them feeling anxious and then sad because they, you know, they're not going to know anyone. They're sort of, you know, they've lost something, you know, because of what they've left behind. I talk to mum who seems to be worried themselves about it, and so I don't talk to anybody, right? You know, it leads to this sort of sense of how does that help in terms of these beliefs that drive feelings and behaviours, reinforce the activating event as, you know, of changing the school. They make this sort of sense of, because I'm feeling anxious and sad already. I've got these beliefs that, you know, I'm not going to know anybody and everybody else is going to, and I'm going to get lost, and that, you know, I'm going to be scared. You know, I try and talk to mum or dad about it, you know, but they're worried. I just shut down and I think, well, I better not talk to anybody. It doesn't really help me with my experience of my change of school, and I go round and round and round on this cycle. This basis, this sort of sense, if you think about the ability to think flexibly and realistically, often what happens is that our beliefs are not true or not completely true. Right? So, you know, I will get lost might be true, because I might get lost in the first day or even in the first week, because I'm in somewhere new, and so I might do. But, you know, and so everybody else will know somebody else. Well, that's not true, or it's probably not completely true, because I'm sure there's going to be other people that are not going to know anybody as well. So you can see straight away how noticing what those beliefs are, knowing what those beliefs are, already you can start to see what you're missing, right? You know, and that's the aim with this. It's to try and think as accurately and as flexibly as possible, so that then that leads to, you know, the consequences, the feelings and the emotions that I feel, you know, at least are based on more accurate and flexible thinking. This is underpins sort of everything that we do. For those of you that are interested to know about this, you know, in more detail, we do cover this in more detail on our program called Raise Resilience, which really gets into the detail of this. And I, you know, but that's sort of the overview of it there. So just to think about this in terms of change and uncertainty, if you think about the beliefs that I just said, so those beliefs that, you know, something happens and I have these beliefs, this internal radio station that tells me either about the causes of the situation or the implications of it, they are down this left-hand side, right? So I believe the situation could be. So, you know, the change means that I've lost something. It might be something tiny, it might be something big. So the loss might be, you know, something small in terms of just not walking to school in the same way, you know, or which could be a small thing for some children, but a bigger thing for some you know, somebody else. You know, your friend not being there, you know, who's moved away, could be a bigger thing, right? I've got some beliefs that says the change is bad. Is dangerous in some way. I've got some beliefs that say that this change somebody needs protecting, right? You know, my child is, you know, other people won't know about their ADHD, or other people won't know that they don't like certain situations, or, you know, that they're not very good at holding their pen, or, you know, whatever it might be. And so I've got to protect them. They could be our beliefs, right? You know, as parents. We might have beliefs that sort of, you know, that about being outside of our comfort zone, right? And not, you know, having that sort of sense of, you know, that safety is taken away from me. And so, and I'm outside of it. We might have beliefs that about not being as good as other people. Everybody else is going to at least know somebody, and I'm not going to know anybody. Or, you know, some people are, you know, better at meeting new people, and I'm not. So these are the beliefs that we can have down the left-hand side. If you think about the responses to it, both the emotion and the behaviour, if we see the emotions such as sadness, it's usually associated with behaviour of withdrawing in some way. That may be just not saying anything, shutting down and not saying anything. It may be physically withdrawing from a situation. If I've got some beliefs that something bad or dangerous is going to happen, so that the change means that, you know, it's bad and it's dangerous, that's likely to generate anxiety in me and produce behaviour that shows that I'm agitated, right? If I have some beliefs that says that this change is going to be, you know, is going to be, it means that I've got to protect something needs protecting, could be me, you know, it's likely to lead to emotions of behaviour and acting aggressively. What I'm trying to get to here with this chart is to show that if we see what we can see in here is the emotions and the behaviours, right? Because that's normally the external thing that we see. What we often don't know is the beliefs that are going on, because they're happening inside our heads or inside our children's heads. But if this helps us listen with more empathy, because if I know that my child is experiencing sadness and is behaving in a way which is withdrawing, although I might not know what they're actually thinking, what this chart does is give me a sense, okay, some of their beliefs has got to be something to do with loss. They've lost something in some way. And so that gives me let me listen in, you know, let me ask some questions, or let me listen into a way that's really going to help me explore that in a bit more. And I know what it feels to feel sad, right? And, you know, because I know what feeling sad feels like. Equally, if, you know, what I see is anger and aggression, which as a parent, I might not be used to seeing in my child, or two, often anger and aggressive behaviour is difficult to deal with, right? We don't like it, we don't want it. But if I know that the beliefs that might be leading to that are to do with protection, right? Something needs to be protected, either somebody else or I get that, right? Because I know what it feels like to feel that sort of sense of anger because, something needs protecting. So this, you go back to this idea that there is a link between what we think and how we feel and how we behave, and that we can have this sense of the emotions and the behaviors that we see that can be associated to certain beliefs. It helps us just to listen with more empathy. So, okay, I might not like the behavior that I see and that they're displaying, but I can understand where it's coming from. That as a parent helps us, first of all, to sort of understand it a bit more, but also helps us to just notice and recognize those points where where I might need to just pay attention. I might, that sort of sense of being more on a level with our children as opposed to not understanding and not sort of having that sense of what's going on for them. The psychology is Albert Ellis. It's actually, this is actually the same model. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to go back. The same model that's used in CBT. So for those of you that are familiar with cognitive behavioural therapy, this is absolutely the same model that is applied to that approach. So cognitive behavioural therapy is an intervention that enables people to be able to deal with, understand what's going on for themselves, to be able to sort of change some of that behaviour. We apply the same model, but to just lead to that competency of being able to think flexibly and realistically. But it's the same model, it focuses on it. And Lisa's just saying, yeah, she's doing a psychology undergraduate story. So yeah, I hope in your psychology that you are doing stuff on positive psychology as well. So that would be really interesting to look at. So I hope that just gives a bit of insight. Again, I just want to stop for a second and to just think about one thing I'd really like you to do at the end of this session is to just think about up to 5 small everyday, or at least start with small everyday situations, specific things where you might be concerned or where you might be concerned most about either change for yourself. Because I think one of the things is, if you think about, you've been used to every day going into the playground, talking to other mums and dads, being able to see that, and that you're not going to do that anymore. So there's a change for yourself that might be called, you're going to miss people, or you're not going to, be as connected to the school. So that might be one example. Or also a change for your child and something that bothers you sort of most about it. And if you can think about up to 5 sort of situations, that's going to help be a sort of a source as we go through each session to just think about how perhaps some of the concerns that you have are things that you can deal with sort of separately to the things that your children might be thinking about or concerned about around change. And it's quite interesting to just think about those as 2 separate things, right? Because even if you said to your child at the end of this, don't do it necessarily at the end of tonight, because I'd rather you get through the 4 sessions first. But wouldn't it be a great activity for you to write 5 things down that you're concerned and worried about, and then to write 5 things down? And then to have a conversation about the differences or the similarities around. So not necessarily trying to focus on how we deal with them, but just noticing between you and your child or your children, if you're worrying about similar or different things. And interesting if you did it with your partner or with, the other adults in your, who are responsible for your children, right? Because again, I think it's really interesting to think about what are we actually dealing with, and what are the similarities and what are the differences? Because I can hazard a guess that they're probably not going to be the same, or they're probably not going to be exactly the same. So if you go back to this idea about what's the activating event, the activating event can sometimes be just a little bit different, but that leads to different beliefs, different internal radio station that's telling me. And so because of this link between what we think and how we feel and how we behave, actually there's nuances and differences there. And, and often what it is that, we've got all of these different things all sort of in the pot together. And actually, if we slow things down and think about it more, more specifically, just the process of doing that straight away. So I was worried about that, but you're actually worried about that. Okay. So it's my child. So if it's something that I'm worried about for myself, then I can deal with that separately. And I think it's an amazing thing to say to our children, look, mum or dad's worried about this, but I know you're not worried about it, so that's fine, but I'm going to do this to be able to help me, because that's great modeling of them thinking about how you're dealing with that change and that uncertainty, right? You know, but what I know you're worried about is this, so you know, let's have a think about that. And you know, it just creates that sort of sense of difference for it. So that's an activity to do at the end. So I'm conscious that I've got 10 minutes left. I can do this. I'm going to try as much as possible not to overrun. But I want to finish today's session really thinking about emotions, energy, and change, because they are so interconnected. If you think about any type of change, if I'm stopping doing one thing and starting to do something else, it straight away takes us out of what we know, you know, our comfort zone, what we know already. And immediately that we do that, we can start to get in what we call caught up in worst case scenario thinking, right? All we're doing is all of our internal radio station is all focused on the absolute worst that can happen. Right, you know, my child is changing school, they're not going to know anybody. If they don't know anybody, they're going to be anxious. If they get anxious, they're going to cry. If they cry, people are going to laugh at them. If they laugh at them, they're not going to want to go to school tomorrow. If they don't want to go to school, yeah, before you know it, we are caught up in this, you know, worst case scenario thinking. As we do that, our anxiety grows, and anxiety is high energy. So high energy means that our energy is drained, because we are, you know, catastrophizing and, you know, and creating this sort of anxiety. When that happens, we not only do we experience negative emotions, but we are far less likely to be able to problem solve. When we are caught up in worst case scenario thinking, literally what's happening in our brain, if they've got these wonderful machines now that can, you know, that can look at what's going on inside the brain when we are experiencing anxiety. One of the things that happens is literally all of the neural pathways stop talking to one another, because, you know, we've got this anxiety which is focusing on this, you know, one very specific part of our brain. And, you know, and if you think about it in terms of evolution, that sort of sense of you know, sort of being frightened or sort of scared or, you know, anxious in some way is what allowed us to survive as human beings back in the day. Right, when we needed to be anxious about tigers biting us or whatever it might be, we were able to focus on that, you know, that you know, and you know, bop the tiger on its head. That, but you know, so there was good reason why the rest of it sort of shuts down and we have to focus on the threat. But the thing around you know, about dealing with change and you know, uncertainty is that if we can allow more positive emotion to creep in, literally what that does is allow our neural pathways to all open up and talk to one another. And if that's happening, then we're able to problem solve. Not only are we able to think more clearly, but we're able to problem solve, because already you've got more parts of your brain talking to one another, and you know, straight away you've got more options open to you. So you know, I'm gonna just talk to you about that in a second. I think the other thing, you know, is about often what happens when we're outside of our comfort zone is that we just try to avoid it, because we want to stay within our safety net, and so therefore we avoid going outside of it. But you know, if you think about where learning happens, this visual that you have here, learning happens when we extend ourselves out of our comfort zone. Only outside of where we are now. So I'm not talking about stretching ourselves into our panic zone where it's just too far, but actually just allowing ourselves to move beyond where we are right now, moving ourselves out of that sort of sense of comfort zone, you know, because that's where we're going to learn. And think about it with your children. Think about the amount of times where they might have done something that they felt outside of their comfort zone, but we encourage them to do it. Riding a bike, for example, right? You know, and we do it in a slow, safe, controlled way for them that allows them to sort of learn and push themselves out of their comfort zone sort of slowly. And, you know, and that's what's really important, I think, around change and uncertainty. Because if we, you know, if we push ourselves too much, what we do is we end up in burnout, you know, because we sort of generated all this anxiety and concern, and, you know, we haven't looked after ourselves, we haven't thought about how we recover from that change and uncertainty, and so we end up burning ourselves out. So I really want to leave you with this sort of sense today around shifting the balance around taking control of of uncertainty. For me, change is going to happen. Uncertainty is going to happen. I think a massive message that we can give our children is that that's to be expected. Life is never going to stay the same, because it doesn't, right? It changes and shifts all the time. But that we can learn to develop this muscle by actions that we can take that can really help us. So we sort of bank these into 5 blocks, really. There's bodily stuff that we can do. Muscle relaxation, breathing, taking notice of our environment, you know, just doing stuff that allows us to be able to calm down and to relax. There are so many amazing apps, things that we can watch on YouTube now that are just this sort of sense of breathing, relaxation, you know, that sort of sense of being in the moment, if you like. Then I think there's another whole load of things that we can do that are about distraction. You know, sometimes when we are, you know, focused on the change that we've got, maybe what we need to do for the next 10 minutes is do something to completely distract ourselves. Let's focus on something completely else, you know, something else. Let's go and read a book, or go and have a conversation about something completely different. Let's do a mental game. You know, I've got this worst case scenario thinking going on, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to calm myself down by doing a mental game. I don't know, I'm going to count backwards in 3s from 100 to 0. I'm going to go through the alphabet and think of a letter, you know, an animal from A to Z, you know, for something to just distract us. Connection, and you know, I talked a lot in the beginning about human connection, and I do just want to pause for a moment, guys, and as I do that, I'm probably going to run over by about 5 or 6 minutes. So for those of you that have to go, no problem at all. It's recorded, so you're not going to miss it. But for those of you that stay, apologies. But I do just want to, I don't want to rush the finish, because I want to say around connection that on the one hand, we all know that a problem shared is a problem halved, right? We know that talking helps, right? But I'm going to say that I also think that connection can be really, talking can be really hard. And it's as someone who's studied resilience for a long, long time, for me, when I'm not feeling very resilient, when I'm feeling vulnerable to a situation, because I don't know, I've dealt with some sort of change that I've never dealt with before, it's much easier for me to do what I call my hedgehog mode, to go inside myself, put all my spikes on the outside so no one talks to me. And then when I'm feeling a bit better, then I might come out and talk to people. It's actually really hard for me to talk to other people when I'm not feeling very resilient myself, for 2 main reasons. One is that I don't want to burden other people with my troubles, because I think they've got enough of their own. And 2, and the main reason, is that if I do reach out to somebody else and then they don't give me what I need, I feel let down. Now, you think about that process. I'm opening myself up. I'm making myself vulnerable to other person by saying, I'm not, you know, I'm feeling upset or concerned or embarrassed or whatever it might be. And I'm opening myself up and telling you, and then the other person doesn't give me back some sort of what I need, I feel let down. And I'm probably opening myself up to somebody I care and trust with, right? And so then I've lost something, and then I feel worse, because not only have I opened myself up and felt vulnerable, that other person didn't give, and now I've lost something, you know, I no longer trust that person quite as much as I did before, or, you know. So I don't think we can underestimate how hard talking is. So one of the things that I'm going to suggest, or helps me talk to other people, is I give a framework around connection, right? I say, first of all, look, I only want to talk about this thing for 5 minutes. And I actually wanted to time us, because if I don't time us, we're going to talk over and over, and I'm going to go on and on and on about it for too long, and that doesn't help. So I only want to talk about this for 5 minutes. I'm really clear with the other person what I want from them. So I'll say, look, I don't want you to tell me what I should and shouldn't do, but I'm just really interested in your perspective on this. Or, you know, I'm really interested in how you might have responded to that situation. I give it a really clear framework, because then that gives me the control to carry on and have the conversation. This is a great thing to model with your children. So say to them, look, can you help me with something? I'm worried about this and I want you to help me. Let's just talk about it for 5 minutes. And what I want you to do is to just listen. I actually don't even necessarily want you to say anything. I just want you to listen. You know, it gives that sort of sense that, one, you're modeling really good behavior to your children, and they can see, oh, well, mum or dad or whoever, you know, comes and talks to me, and is asking something, but they're being really specific about it. You're creating that sense of one, that you know that you need, that you're interested in their perspective, and you're modeling how you might hope that they might then come back and communicate and talk to you. You're giving them that safety so that they can say to you, look, you know, mum, dad, carer, teacher, whoever it might be, you know, I want to talk to you about this thing, and all I want to know is how you might have dealt with this when you were my age. Or and then that's it. I don't want you to tell me what to do, and I don't want to carry on about this, you know, afterwards. I just want, you know, you're creating that framework to be able to give them the framework to be able to do it. The last two, the first is imagination. Our brains are amazing organs. So if you think about, if I create this real visualized image in my mind of a safe space, what does it look like? What can I hear? Who else is there with me? What can I see? What can I smell? I get this real vivid sense, draw it, you know, get this real vivid sense of it. I can go there in my mind whenever I want to. So, you know, I'm in a situation that I can't physically move out of, but actually I can go to my safe space in my mind whenever I want to. It's a great technique, you know, to teach your children that, you know, they might need to get into their notes. So they've got to be at school from 9 to 3 o'clock. If there's some points in that where they, you know, create this safe visualize, then they can just go there for a minute in them, you know, and that will helpfully like create a bit of positive emotion in them in that moment. And the final thing is the physical stuff. Exercise, you know, it really matters. A lot of what I'm talking about in this is the sort of psychological stuff, but the physical stuff matters as well. So exercise matters, sleep matters. Too much sleep can often be as unhelpful as too little sleep, and nutrition. So we're not really going to cover those things necessarily in these programs, but in this series of programs, but I'm not saying that they don't matter. Exercise, sleep and nutrition really do matter. So some key messages that I really hope that you take away from today's session is, you know, recognizing that it's impossible to sustain high energy, positive emotion all of the time, right? I'm not suggesting that we're always going to be excited and happy and, you know, so that's impossible. But the negative emotions, you know, and that negative emotions can be useful. So don't be scared to notice them. Don't be scared to have a conversation with your children when they're experiencing a negative emotion. Be interested in it, you know, and then thinking about what are the things that we can do to help us calm that, you know, that unhelpful emotion down, or where might a negative emotion actually help and give you that bit of spur to sort of, you know, to take that risk or to take yourself out of your comfort zone. So, you know, really starting to build this narrative around both positive and negative emotions, and that recognizing and knowing what we're, you know, what's going on, you know, in our bodies when we're experiencing certain emotions, and not being frightened to have a conversation about those. Recognizing the importance of creating that balance. So, you know, if we notice that what we're doing is we've got a lot of high energy type stuff going on, how can we calm down? How can we use breathing techniques or you know, distraction to really self-regulate and to calm down? And to really sort of, as a self-reflection activity, you know, what actions can I take to make sure that I've got the right balance for me? So, you know, if you think about, if your child is going to do something, or you're going to do something for the first time, like starting a new school, make sure when they come away from that situation that you do something which is going to be some recovery. Do something really lovely that they're going to enjoy, or you're going to enjoy, that just gives you that sense of being able to, you know, to just experience some of that positive emotion, because that's what's going to enable you to recharge the batteries. That's what's going to enable you to give you some of that sort of sense of control back. So one of the really good sort of sources of or one of the resources that we're going to give you is this 5 Ways to Wellbeing. These are evidence-based actions that have been proven that if people can use them on a regular basis, they can help not only with your well-being, but they help you to create really good habits that are helpful for emotional resilience and be able to deal with uncertainty and you know, and change. The 5 actions are connect, be active, take notice, keep learning, give. And what the evidence says is that if you can build these actions into your regular days and weeks, so for some people you might do all 5 of these every day, for some of these you might make sure that you do all 5 over a whole week, but they'll just give you a source of the sorts of things that are going to enable you to create recovery and get you into that really good habit of focusing on the good stuff, and not just paying attention to all the difficult stuff around change. You know, thinking about keep learning as a way of approaching change, thinking about what can you encourage in your children to give to themselves or to other people as a reward for dealing with the change or the transition that they're faced with. How can I take notice of how I've dealt and the bits that I did really well around that change? Because if you focus on the things that are good, you can do more of it. And over the next 3 sessions, I'm going to sort of build on these ideas more and more as we go through. But we will send you the link to the 5 Ways to Wellbeing as a sort of a source of resource to help you think about some of the good habits that you can take. So the resources that you're actually going to receive all the resources for these 4 sessions, but the ones that we sort of really want you to focus on this week with your children. I mean, and I think, have a go at some of these resources yourself, because it will help as a sort of a self-reflection for you on some of the things that we've spoken about. But, an activity around what is resilience, helping them think about actually what we mean by resilience, because you sort of break it down, it helps them to think about that. There's an activity around emotions, which I think is useful for adults and for children, particularly one around emotions and change. The activity around the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, and an activity that says, getting them to think about what advice they might give to somebody else. That sort of sense that they do have sense of agency, that they do have a sense of control. Your children, sort of as this, to finish on a disclaimer, your children, I don't know them at all, so please have a look through all the materials before you have a go at them. If you look at them and you've got questions that are raised, then you can either bring those back to the session next week, on Thursday, not next week, on Thursday, and hopefully through the 4 sessions, the ideas that we've sort of introduced today, will explore those in greater detail and add to them with the other bits that we're going to add to. So I'm really sorry for overrunning. Thank you for those of you that have stayed right the way through to the end. Please have a go at the things that I've spoken about, and I will see you on Thursday at 6 o'clock, where we can really focus and drill down on a growth mindset. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will see you then.